I slept next to a criminal for 17 years, and only realized it when the police kicked down my door. That morning changed everything. They called him a con man, a thief, a predator who stole millions from elderly people, and I, his wife, the mother of his children, primera A, de no idea. While I cooked dinner, he planned crimes. While I tucked our kids into bed, he counted stolen money. While I believed in our marriage, he was destroying lives. The worst part, I didn't just lose my husband that day. I lost myself, my identity, my entire reality. This is the story of how I survived the how I rebuilt from nothing. How I learned that sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. The morning of March 15th started like every other Tuesday in our Park Slope Browns. I woke at 6:30 to the familiar sounds of Brooklyn waking up, garbage trucks rumbling down 7th Avenue, the distant screech of the F train, Mrs. Chun's wind chimes singing in the breeze next door. Sunlight filtered through our bedroom curtains, casting soft shadows across the hardwood floors. We'd refinished together 5 years ago, back when we still talked about our dreams. David was already gone. His side of the bed was cold, the pillow barely indented. I pressed my hand against the sheets and felt nothing, no warmth, no trace of him. This had become normal. He'd been leaving earlier and coming home later for the past 8 months, always with the same explanation. The construction business is brutal right now. Rachel, if I don't hustle, we lose the contracts. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? We'd been married for 17 years. We had 2 beautiful children, Emma, 15, and Jacob, 12. We had this home, this life we'd built brick by brick. David Sullivan was my husband, my partner, the man I'd chosen when I was 23 years old and still believed in fairy tales. I pulled on my robe and walked to the kitchen, my bare feet cold against the floor. The house felt too quiet. Through the window above the sink, I could see our small backyard, the oak tree David planted when Emma was born, the patio where we'd hosted countless barbecues, the swing set that Jacob had outgrown but we couldn't bring ourselves to remove. The coffee maker sputtered to life. I stood there watching it brew, thinking about the woman I used to be. Before marriage, before children, I'd been a paralegal at a law firm in Manhattan. I'd had ambitions, plans for law school, dreams of becoming an attorney. But life happened, Emma P., and I'd made choices, good choices. I'd thought. I became a stay-at-home mother, poured myself into raising our children, supported David's business ventures. Mom! Emma's voice startled me. She stood in the doorway, still in her pajamas, her dark hair tangled from sleep. She had my eyes hazel, questioning, always searching for truth. Morning, sweetheart. Want some breakfast? She shrugged, that universal teenage gesture that meant everything and nothing. Where's Dad? Already at the site. You know how he is. Emma nodded, but something flickered across her face. Doubt. Concern. Before I could ask, she grabbed a granola bar and disappeared back upstairs. I told myself it was normal teenage distance. I told myself a lot of things. By 8:15, I'd gotten Jacob ready for school, packed his lunch, reminded him about his math test. He hugged me at the door, still young enough to not be embarrassed by his mother's affection, and ran to catch the bus at the corner. I watched him go, my baby boy with his backpack bouncing, his sneakers untied. Despite my constant reminders, the house fell silent again. I cleaned the kitchen, started a load of laundry, paid bills at the dining room table. Our checking account showed healthy numbers. David's construction company, Sullivan Brothers LLC, had been doing well. Or so the statements said. Money flowed in regularly. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We could afford Emma's violin lessons, Jacob's soccer league, the occasional weekend trip upstate. Everything looked normal. Everything felt wrong. I couldn't pinpoint when the feelings started. Maybe 6 months ago? Maybe longer. It was like watching a photograph slowly fade. You don't notice it day by day, but eventually you realize the colors aren't as bright as they used to be. David's smiles seemed rehearsed. His kisses felt obligatory. When I asked about his day, his answers were vague, scripted, empty. Just the usual. Ratch. Dealing with contractors, chasing payments, putting out fires, but his eyes never met mine when he spoke. I tried to shake it off. Marriage had rough patches, everyone said so. After 17 years, passion fades. Romance becomes routine. This was normal. Primera told myself, and this was life. Around noon, I met my friend Patricia for lunch at a small cafe on 5th Avenue. Patricia had known me since college, had been my maid of honor, had held my hand through both pregnancies. She knew me better than anyone. "You look exhausted," she said, studying my face across the table. "I'm fine. Just busy, Rachel." She reached across and squeezed my hand. "I've known you for 23 years. You're not fine." I wanted to tell her. I wanted to say that I felt like I was living with a stranger, that my husband had become a ghost who slept in my bed but existed somewhere else entirely. But the words stuck in my throat. "It's just stress," I said instead. "Emma's applying to colleges next year, Jacob's struggling with algebra, and David's been working crazy hours." Patricia didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. We talked about her daughter's upcoming wedding, her mother's health, the rising rent prices in Brooklyn, normal things, safe things. I walked home slowly, taking the long route through Prospect Park. March in Brooklyn was unpredictable, cold one day, warm the next. Today the sun was out, and people filled the park. Joggers, dog walkers, mothers, with strollers. I watched them all and wondered if any of them felt as hollow as I did. When I got home, there was a message on the answering machine. David's voice, hurried and tense. "Hey Raj, don't wait up for me tonight. Got a big job in Queens that's running late. Love you. Love you." 2 words he said automatically, meaninglessly, like signing a check. That evening, I made dinner for Emma and Jacob. We ate together at the kitchen table, spaghetti and meatballs, Jacob's favorite. Emma picked at her food, her phone hidden under the table. "Put it away, Emma," I said gently. She sighed but complied. "Dad's not coming home again. He's working late. You know how it is. I don't remember the last time we all ate dinner together," Jacob said, twirling spaghetti on his fork. Neither did I after dinner. After homework was checked and teeth were brushed and goodnight kisses were given, I sat alone in the living room. The television played some mindless show I wasn't watching. I thought about calling David, but what would I say? "Come home. Miss us. Be the man you used to be?" He stumbled in at 11:40. I heard his keys on the door, heard him trying to be quiet, heard him curse when he knocked into the coat rack. "Rachel," his voice was thick, slurred. "You still up?" I met him in the hallway. He smelled like cigarettes and whiskey. His eyes bloodshot, his work shirt wrinkled and stained. "David, are you drunk?" "Just had a couple beers with the guys. Long day." He tried to kiss me, but I turned my head. He ended up kissing my cheek, missing by inches. "You said you were working." I was. We grabbed drinks after. "It's not a crime, Rachel." He laughed at his own words. A sharp, bitter sound that didn't match the man I married. I watched him stumble toward the bedroom, and something inside me cracked. Not broke, not yet. Just cracked, like glass under pressure, waiting for one more hit to shatter completely. That night, lying next to him while he snored, I stared at the ceiling and wondered, who are you? Who have you become? And worse, who was I for not seeing it sooner? I didn't know that in less than 12 hours, I'd have my answer. I didn't know that everything I believed about my life, my marriage, my husband, was about to explode into pieces so small I'd never fit them back together again. Outside, Brooklyn slept. Sirens wailed in the distance. A dog barked. Life continued its normal rhythm. The last normal night of my life. The pounding started at 6:47 a.m. Not knocking. Pounding. The kind of sound that rattles door frames and stops your heart. I jolted awake, disoriented, my mind struggling to process what was happening. Beside me, David sat upright, his face draining of color in a way that would later haunt me. "Police. Search warrant. Open the door." The words cut through the morning silence like a blade. I heard Emma scream from her room. Jacob started crying. "David!" My voice came out as a whisper. "David, what's happening?" He was already out of bed, pulling on jeans with shaking hands. His face, God, his face. That's when I knew. Not what, but that something was catastrophically wrong. You don't look that terrified if you're innocent. Stay here, he said, but his voice cracked. Open the door now, or we're breaking it down. I grabbed my robe and ran after him. The pounding continued, each strike like a hammer to my chest. Through the frosted glass of our front door, I could see shapes, multiple figures. Black uniforms, the red and blue flash of police lights painting our hallway in nightmare colors. David's hand hovered over the doorknob. He looked back at me, and in his eyes I saw something I'd never seen before. Complete, abject terror. Rachel eyed the door, exploded inward. They came in like a flood, NYPD officers in tactical gear, shields, weapons, drawn. Someone shoved David against the wall, hands yanking his arms behind his back. I heard the metallic click of handcuffs, heard him grunt in pain. Heard myself screaming, "Clear the bedrooms! Movi, 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 Movi." Officers poured past me, their boots thundering up our stairs. I heard Emma shrieking, heard Jacob sobbing, heard furniture being moved, drawers being opened, our home being violated. "Ma'am, step back." A female officer pushed me toward the living room. "Are there children in the house?" "Yes. Yes, they're upstairs. Please. They're just kids. Please don't. We have minors." The officer shouted to someone, "Get them downstairs. Keep them with the mother." Everything was chaos. Officers everywhere, radios crackling with codes I didn't understand. Our peaceful Brooklyn morning transformed into a war zone. I saw neighbors gathering outside, Miss tuned with her hand over her mouth, the Rodriguezes recording on their phones. People I'd smiled at for years now witnessing my humiliation. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, an officer's hand on her shoulder. Her face was pale, tears streaming down her cheeks. Behind her, Jacob clutched his stuffed elephant, the one he'd supposedly outgrown, but still slept with his whole body shaking. "Mom!" Emma's voice broke. "Mom, what's happening?" Before I could answer, before I could even move toward them, a detective stepped in front of me. He was tall, gray-haired, his face showing the deep lines of someone who'd seen too much. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Detective Marcus Hayes, NYPD, Major Crimes. We have a warrant to search this premises." He held up papers, but my vision was blurring with tears. I couldn't read them, couldn't process anything. "I don't understand. There must be a mistake. Ma'am, I need you and your children to remain in the living room while we execute this warrant. Do not touch anything. Do not attempt to leave. Do you understand?" I nodded because my voice had stopped working. They brought Emma and Jacob to me. I pulled them close, one arm around each, trying to shield them from this nightmare. Emma buried her face in my shoulder. Jacob wouldn't stop crying. "Where's Dad?" Jacob asked between sobs. "Where did they take Dad?" I looked toward the hallway where David had been pressed against the wall. They were reading him, his rights now, the words I'd heard 1,000 times on television but never imagined hearing in my own home. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." David's eyes found mine across the chaos, and in that moment, I saw everything. The guilt, the shame, the apology he'd never be able to speak. The confirmation of every doubt I'd buried, every instinct I'd ignored, every whisper in my mind that something was wrong. He'd known this was coming. How long had he known? "David Sullivan," Detective Hayes' voice was formal, final. "You're under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You will be transported to the 78th Precinct for booking." Each word was a bomb detonating in my chest. Grand larceny, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. These weren't words from our life. These were words from movies, from news reports about strangers, from a reality that didn't include brownstones in Park Slope and children who did homework at the kitchen table and husbands who kissed you goodbye every morning. Except mine did. They walked him past us. He tried to stop, tried to say something, but they kept him moving. I watched my husband, the father of my children, the man I'd built a life with, being led out of our home in handcuffs, while our neighbors watched and our children cried, and my entire world collapsed. The door closed behind them, but the officers remained. They were everywhere, systematically tearing our life apart. I heard them in David's home office, opening filing cabinets, heard them in the basement, heard them in our bedroom, going through our most private spaces. Señora Anne Sullivan. Detective Hayes sat down across from me, his expression gentler now but no less serious. I know this is overwhelming, but I need to ask you some questions. I want a lawyer. The words came automatically. I'd been a paralegal. I knew my rights. You're not under arrest, ma'am. You're not being charged with anything. But your cooperation would be helpful. I have nothing to say. I held my children tighter. Not without a lawyer. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. That's your right. But Mrs. Sullivan Richelieu should know that your husband has been under investigation for 18 months. We have evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement from multiple clients, falsified contracts, and money laundering through offshore accounts. 18 months. A year and a half. All those late nights. All those vague explanations. All those times I'd felt something was wrong but talked myself out of it. We believe the total amount stolen exceeds $3 million. The number didn't even register. It was too large, too impossible. This was David. David, who coached Jacob's soccer team. David, who helped Emma with her science projects. David, who'd cried at our wedding, who'd held my hand when I gave birth, who'd promised to love and honor me until death do us part. There's been a mistake, I whispered. I'm afraid not, ma'am. Then I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know anything. We believe you. Detective Hayes's voice was surprisingly kind. The evidence suggests you were kept completely in the dark. But you'll need to prove that. You'll need to show that you weren't complicit, that you didn't benefit from these crimes, that you're a victim here too. A victim. The word felt like acid on my skin. The search lasted for hours. They took boxers of documents. They took David's computer, his phone records, files I'd never seen before hidden in places I'd never looked. They photographed everything. They emptied our safe, cataloged our valuables, questioned me about purchases I couldn't remember making. By 11 a.m., they were done. Detective Hayes handed me a receipt for everything they'd seized and a card with his contact information. You'll need a lawyer, Mrs. Sullivan. A good one. This is going to get complicated. After they left, after the door finally closed and the police cars drove away and the neighbors slowly dispersed, I stood in my destroyed living room with my traumatized children and tried to understand how my life had become unrecognizable in a single morning. Emma was the first to speak. Mom? Is Dad going to prison? I opened my mouth to say no, to reassure her, to fix this like I'd fixed every scraped knee and broken toy and bad dream. But the lie wouldn't come. I don't know, baby. I don't know anything anymore. And that was the truth. The only truth I had left. The lawyer's office smelled like old books and expensive cologne. Lawrence Brenner was 58, with silver hair and the kind of calm demeanor that probably cost $500 an hour. He'd been recommended by Patricia, whose brother-in-law knew people who knew people. In Brooklyn, that's how these things worked. Mrs. Sullivan, I've reviewed the police report and the charges against your husband. This is serious. He folded his hands on the mahogany desk between us. Very serious. It was March 17th. 2 days since the raid. 2 days that felt like 2 years. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw officers with guns, heard Emma screaming, felt Jacob's small body shaking against mine. The kids had stayed home from school. I couldn't send them back yet. Couldn't subject them to the questions and stares and whispers. David was still in custody at Rikers Island. Bail had been set at $2 million. $2 million. We didn't have $2 million. We didn't have anything. Apparently, everything we owned was now evidence in a criminal investigation. Tell me what you know, Brenner said. Nothing. I know nothing. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. I thought he was a general contractor. I thought he ran a legitimate business. I thought we were happy, and you had no knowledge of the fraudulent activities. No suspicious transactions, no unexplained money. No. He handled all the finances for the business. I managed our household accounts, but those were separate. He'd deposit money every month for bills and expenses. I never questioned it. Brenner made notes on a yellow legal pad. The prosecution is alleging that David systematically clients, mostly elderly homeowners, by taking large deposits for renovation work that was never completed or was done so poorly it required complete reconstruction. He used shell companies to hide the money, falsified insurance claims, and created fake contracts and invoices. Each word was a punch to my stomach. The victims, Brenner continued, include a 70-year-old woman in Bensonhurst who paid $120,000 for a kitchen renovation that destroyed her home's structural integrity, an 82-year-old man in Bay Ridge who lost his entire retirement savings, $340 to a roof replacement that was never finished. There are 17 documented cases. Rachel, 17 families whose lives David ruined. I thought I might vomit. He stole from old people? The words barely made it past my lips. Elderly, disabled, vulnerable people. People who trusted him because he seemed honest and professional. And Brenner paused, his eyes meeting mine with something that might have been pity. Because he had a wife and children. A family? That made him seem trustworthy. We'd been props. Emma and Jacob and we'd been part of his disguise. Mrs. Sullivan, I need you to understand something. The prosecution will investigate you thoroughly. They'll examine every bank statement, every purchase, every vacation, every piece of jewelry. If they find evidence that you benefited from these crimes knowingly, you could be charged as an accomplice. But I didn't know. Then we prove that. We show your complete separation from the business finances. We demonstrate that you were deceived as much as his victims were. We paint you as another casualty of David Sullivan's criminal enterprise. Another casualty. Another victim. Another life destroyed by a man I'd loved. What about my children? I asked. What happens to them? That depends on several factors. If you're charged, if you lose this house, if David's assets are seized, which they will be, you'll need to demonstrate that you can provide a stable environment. Child Protective Services may get involved, especially given the traumatic circumstances. Terror flooded through me. They'd take my kids. Not if we can show you're fit and capable. But Rachel, he leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm, your life as you knew it is over. This house, your savings, David's pension, everything, it's all potentially subject to seizure for victim restitution. You need to prepare yourself for that reality. I left his office in a daze. Brooklyn was in full spring bloom, cherry blossoms on the trees, people in light jackets, the world continuing its cheerful existence while mine imploded. When I got home, there were reporters on my street. 2 news vans, cameras pointed at my house, a blonde woman in a blazer doing a stand-up in front of my stoop. David Sullivan, accused of defrauding elderly victims of more than $3 million, lived here with his wife and 2 children who apparently had no knowledge of his criminal activities. I couldn't go inside, couldn't face those cameras. I drove to Patricia's house in Cobble Hill and sat in her kitchen while she made tea. I couldn't drink. I keep replaying everything, I told her, every conversation, every late night, every excuse. How did I not see it? Because he lied to you. Because he was good at lying. Was he always lying? Was any of it real? Our wedding, our children, 17 years of marriage, was I married to a lie? Patricia didn't have an answer. Nobody did. My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanting statements, friends calling to offer support that felt like pity. Emma's school counselor checking on her well-being, Jacob's soccer coach asking if he'd be returning to the team. And then, on March 19th, David called from Reich. His voice on the collect call was barely recognizable. Rachel? God, Rachel. I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I stood in Patricia's guest room, the phone pressed so hard against my ear it hurt. Never meant for what? To get caught? To hurt you? To hurt the kids. I was trying to provide for us, trying to give you the life you deserved by stealing from old people. By destroying families. That's what I deserved. I got in over my head. It started small, cutting corners, inflating invoices, and then it snowballed. I couldn't stop. I tried to stop, Rachel, I swear, but I was too deep. And how long? My voice was ice. How long have you been doing this? Silence on the line. Then, 5 years. 5 years. Emma was 10. Jacob was 7. We'd taken that trip to Disney World. Renovated the kitchen. Bought Emma her violin. Celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and Christmases. All of it built on stolen money. Built on lies. Built on the suffering of people who'd trusted him. Did you ever love me? I asked. Was any of it real? Of course, it was real. Rachel, you and the kids are everything to me. That's why I did this. To give you everything. To be the provider. To be the man you needed me to be. I needed you to be honest. I needed you to be decent. I needed you to be a father our children could be proud of. Tears streamed down my face. And instead, you're a criminal. You're going to prison. And you've left us with nothing but shame and debt, and a legacy of cruelty. Please, Rachel, please don't give up on me. On us. We can get through this. There is no us anymore, David. There hasn't been an us for a long time. I just didn't realize I was the only one who didn't know it. I hung up before he could respond. That night, I lay awake in Patricia's guest room and made the hardest decision of my life. I called Lawrence Brenner and told him I wanted a divorce. I wanted full custody. I wanted to cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for guaranteed immunity from charges. Are you sure? Brenner asked. Once you testify against him, there's no going back. I'm sure. My loyalty is to my children now, not to him. Never to him again. On March 23rd, the New York Post ran a front-page story. Brooklyn con man's wife files for divorce. They'd somehow gotten our wedding photo, David and I on the courthouse steps, young and smiling and stupidly, impossibly happy. I stared at that photo and barely recognized the woman in the white dress. She was someone else. Someone naive, someone who believed in fairy tales and happily ever after. I wasn't her anymore. I would never be her again. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Less dramatic. Just a wood-paneled room with fluorescent lights and the faint smell of cleaning solution, but the weight of it, the presence of justice, of consequence, of irreversible truth pressed down on me like physical force. It was June 8th. 3 months since the raid. 3 months of therapy sessions for Emma and Jacob, of legal meetings, of slowly dismantling the life I'd built. The house was in foreclosure. Our bank accounts had been frozen. Everything David had touched was contaminated, tainted, evidence of crime. I'd moved us to a small 2-bedroom apartment in Sunset Park, 30 blocks from our brownstone but worlds away from the life we'd known. Emma slept on the pull-out couch. Jacob shared my room. We ate pasta every night because it was cheap. I'd gotten a job at a law firm in Manhattan. My old boss had taken pity on me, but the salary barely covered rent and groceries. This was my life now. Survival. One day at a time. David's trial had started 2 weeks earlier. The prosecution had 17 victims ready to testify, mountains of financial evidence, years of falsified documents. His public defender was competent but overwhelmed. The case was open and shut, but I was the star witness. The wife, the one who could testify that I'd known nothing, suspected nothing, been as deceived as everyone else. Except that wasn't entirely true anymore. In the months since the arrest, memories had surfaced. Small things I dismissed or ignored. That time, in 2019, when David came home with $40,000 in cash, claiming he'd won it betting on the Knicks. The phone calls he'd taken in the garage, lowering his voice when I walked by. The business trips that lasted for days, but only had 2 nights of hotel charges. The way he'd encouraged me to focus on the kids, to not worry about finances, to let him handle everything. I'd been willfully blind, not criminal, not complicit. But not completely innocent either. The prosecution calls Rachel Sullivan to the stand. My legs barely worked as I walked to the witness box. I didn't look at David. Couldn't? If I looked at him, I'd lose my nerve, lose my voice, lose everything I'd fought so hard to build over these impossible months. The prosecutor was a woman named Amanda Chun, 42, with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. We'd met 3 times. She'd been kind but clear. My testimony would determine not just David's fate, but my own. Mrs. Sullivan, please state your relationship to the defendant. I'm his wife. Estranged wife? We're divorcing. My voice echoed in the quiet courtroom. And how long were you married to David Sullivan? 17 years. We separated 3 months ago when he was arrested. During those 17 years, did you have any knowledge of his criminal activities? This was the question. The only question that mattered. No! I looked directly at the jury. 12 faces, 12 strangers holding my future in their hands. I had no knowledge of any criminal activity. I believed my husband was a legitimate contractor running an honest business. Did you participate in the business in any way? Handle finances, meet with clients, review contracts? No. David insisted on keeping the business completely separate from our family life. He said it was to protect me from the stress, from the complexity of running a company. I trusted him. Did you benefit financially from his crimes? I believed I was benefiting from my husband's hard work. But yes, the money he deposited into our household accounts came from his fraudulent activities. I didn't know that at the time. Amanda Chun walked me through our finances. The mortgage payments, the children's school expenses, the family vacations. Every purchase, every bill, every transaction was displayed on screens for the jury to see. Then she showed them the victims. Mrs. Rose Kowalski, 78, from Ben's, her destroyed kitchen, the structural damage, the savings account drained to zero. Mr. Leonard Washington, 82, from Bay Ridge, his unfinished roof, the water damage to his entire home, his empty retirement fund. One by one, Amanda Chun showed 17 families that David had destroyed. And each image, each story, was a dagger to my heart. Because I'd used that money. I'd paid for Emma's violin with it. I'd bought Jacob's birthday presents with it. I'd renovated our kitchen, our beautiful kitchen that I'd been so proud of, with money stolen from people who'd lost everything. Mrs. Sullivan, did you ever suspect your husband was deceiving you? I could have lied, could have said no, been the perfect victim, the innocent wife who never questioned anything. But Emma was watching from the gallery. Jacob was at home, staying with Patricia because I couldn't bear for him to see this. My children deserved better than another parent who lied. Yes. The word came out as a whisper, not about the crimes specifically, but I knew something was wrong. He was distant, secretive. He'd come home late, smelling like alcohol, with vague explanations. I felt it in my gut that he was hiding something. But you didn't investigate? Didn't ask questions? I was afraid. Tears streamed down my face, now unchecked. Afraid of what I might find. Afraid of destroying our family. Afraid of being wrong and looking paranoid. So I convinced myself I was imagining things. I chose to believe him because believing him was easier than facing the truth. And what do you want to say to the victims of your husband's crimes? This wasn't part of the rehearsed testimony. Amanda Chun had warned me she might ask it, but said I could decline to answer. I didn't decline. I turned and looked directly at the families seated behind the prosecution table. 17 sets of eyes staring back at me. Some angry, some grieving, all of them destroyed by the man I'd shared a bed with. I'm sorry. My voice broke. I'm so incredibly sorry. I didn't know what he was doing, but I should have. I should have asked more questions. Looked deeper, not been so comfortable in my ignorance. You lost everything because of David's greed and my willful blindness. I can't give you back what you lost. I can't undo the damage. But I want you to know that I see you. I see what he did to you. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure my children understand the cost of his actions. The courtroom was silent. Amanda Chun nodded, No further questions. David's lawyer stood for cross-examination. He tried to paint me as complicit, as someone who'd enjoyed the lifestyle and asked no questions because I didn't want to know. He tried to make me the villain. But I didn't break. I told the truth. The whole truth. The uncomfortable, complicated truth that I'd been both victim and bystander, both deceived and deliberately ignorant. When it was over, when I stepped down from the witness stand, I walked past David's table. It was crying his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I felt nothing. No pity. No love. No anger. Just the hollow emptiness of complete disconnection. In the hallway, several of the victims approached me. I braced myself for their anger, their accusations. Instead, Mrs. Kowalski took my hand. "You didn't know, honey," she said, her voice thick with a Polish accent and a lifetime of wisdom. "I can see it in your eyes. You're a victim too." I shook my head. "I'm not like you. You lost everything." "I just lost my illusions." "Illusions can be everything," Mr. Washington said. He stood with the help of a walker, his hands trembling with age and probably anger. "You lost your husband, your home, your sense of safety. That's not nothing, but it was nothing compared to what they'd lost, and I wouldn't pretend otherwise." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found David guilty on all counts. The sentencing was set for August. He faced 15 to 25 years in federal prison. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright June sunshine. Emma was waiting on the steps, her face a mixture of hope and devastation. "Is it over?" she asked. "The trial is, but the rest of it." I pulled her close. "The rest takes longer." That night, the three of us sat in our tiny apartment eating takeout Chinese food. Jacob asked if we could visit Dad in prison. Emma asked if we'd ever go back to our old house. I didn't have good answers for either question, but I had something else. Something that had been forming over these long, impossible months. "Listen to me," I told them. "What your father did was wrong. Unforgivably wrong, and we're all paying the price for his choices. But we're going to survive this. We're going to rebuild. Not the life we had that's gone, but something new, something honest, something built on truth instead of lies." "How?" Emma asked. "How do we do that?" "One day at a time, one choice at a time. One honest decision after another." It wasn't much. It wasn't enough. But it was all I had, and for now, it would have to be enough. September arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes Brooklyn feel reborn. The leaves were just starting to turn, and from our apartment window, I could see the Manhattan skyline glowing gold in the late afternoon sun. It had been 6 months since the raid. David was serving his sentence at a federal facility in Pennsylvania, 15 years, with possibility of parole after 10. Emma was 16 now, a junior in high school. Jacob was 30 in 8th grade, navigating the brutal social landscape of middle school with a convicted felon for a father. We'd survive sparely. Some days, it felt like we were thriving. Other days, it felt like we were one breath away from drowning. But we were still here. Still together. Still fighting. I'd been promoted at the law firm. My boss, Catherine Morrison, had given me more responsibility, more trust, a salary that actually allowed us to save a little each month. She knew my story. Everyone in Brooklyn legal circles knew my story, but she'd hired me anyway. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Rachel," she'd said. "Even people who didn't do anything wrong in the first place." I wasn't sure I agreed with the second part. I'd done something wrong. I'd chosen comfort over curiosity. I'd chosen to believe lies because the truth was too frightening. That was my crime. My sin. The thing I had to live with. Therapy helped. Dr. Sarah Goldstein had been seeing all three of us since April. Individual sessions for me and Emma. Family sessions for all of us together. Jacob was in a specialized trauma program for children. The bill was crushing, but Patricia had helped me find a foundation that subsidized therapy for families affected by white-collar crime. Apparently, there were enough of us to need a foundation. "You're holding yourself accountable for things you couldn't have known," Dr. Goldstein had told me in our last session. "David didn't give you access to his business. He actively hid his activities. You didn't have the information you needed to make informed choices. But I had instincts, I'd argued. I felt something was wrong. And you were raised in a generation that told women to trust their husbands, to not be paranoid or controlling, to keep the peace. You were operating within a framework of cultural expectations that disadvantaged you. That's not the same as being complicit. Maybe she was right. Maybe with time, I'd believe her. The divorce had been finalized in July. I kept my married name because changing it felt like one more burden I couldn't shoulder. Emma and Jacob were Sullivan kids, and I was their mother. That identity mattered more than any association with David. The victim's restitution was ongoing. The court had seized everything Gower Brownstone sold at auction, David's business assets liquidated, even the furniture we'd owned. I'd been allowed to keep basic necessities for the kids and myself, but everything else went to repaying the people David had destroyed. It would never be enough. 17 families, $3 million. Even if they recovered every penny, it wouldn't give back the years of stress, the health problems from that stress, the dignity that had been stolen along with their money. Mrs. Kowalski had died in July. A heart attack, according to her daughter, but everyone knew it was really heartbreak. The stress of losing everything, of fighting for restitution, of watching her home slowly deteriorate because she couldn't afford to fix what David had broken. I'd gone to her funeral, stood in the back of the church. Not sure if I had the right to be there. Her daughter had seen me, walked over, and hugged me. She forgave him, Anna Kowalski had said. In the end, she forgave everyone, even herself, for trusting him. I still couldn't forgive David. Maybe I never would, but I was learning to forgive myself. Emma had started dating someone. A boy named Marcus from her English class, respectful, kind, from a good family that probably had their own problems. They hid behind a respectable facade. When she'd asked if she could bring him to dinner, I'd said yes. We made spaghetti together, the three of us in our tiny kitchen. Emma chopped vegetables. Jacob set the table. I stirred sauce and tried not to think about the kitchen in our brownstone, the one I'd been so proud of, the one built with stolen money. Marcus was polite and nervous and clearly smitten with my daughter. He asked permission before taking her hand. He called me ma'am. He made Jacob laugh with terrible jokes. And I thought, this is what good looks like. This is what honest looks like. After dinner, after Marcus had gone home and Jacob was in his room doing homework, Emma sat with me on the couch. Mom, can I ask you something? Always. Do you still love Dad? I'd known this question would come eventually. I'd prepared for it, rehearsed answers in my head, consulted Dr. Goldstein about the right way to navigate it. But when Emma asked it, with her hazel eyes so much like mine, I gave her the truth. I don't know. I love who I thought he was. The man I married, the father I believed you had, but that man doesn't exist. He never did. So how do I love someone who was a fiction? Do you hate him? Sometimes. Other times I just feel empty. Like there's a David-shaped hole in my life, but it's not a hole I want to fill. It's just there, an absence that used to be something. Emma nodded slowly. I think I hate him. Is that okay? Yes, baby. Whatever you feel is okay. You're allowed to be angry. To hate him? To miss him? To feel all of it at once. There's no right way to process what he did to us. He wrote me a letter. From prison? I haven't opened it. My heart clenched. Do you want? Part of me wants to know what he has to say. No. But part of me thinks nothing he says will matter. Words are cheap. Dad taught me that. You don't have to decide now. The letter isn't going anywhere. She leaned her head on my shoulder. This almost woman who'd been forced to grow up too fast. I'm scared, Mom. Of what? That I'm like him. That I have his genes, his capacity for lying, his ability to hurt people and justify it. I pulled her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. You're nothing like him, Emma. You know how I know. Because you're asking the question. Because you're afraid of becoming him? David never had that fear. He never questioned himself. He just acted and justified and rationalized. But you're conscious. You're aware. You're good. How do you know? Because I'm your mother. And unlike your father, I actually pay attention. She laughed a little, that precious sound I'd been afraid I'd never hear again. In October, I ran into one of David's victims at the grocery store. Mr. Leonard Washington, the 80-year-old from Bay Ridge. He was moving slowly down the cereal aisle, squinting at prices through thick glasses. I almost turned around. Almost ran, but Dr. Goldstein's voice was in my head. You can't heal if you keep hiding, Mr. Washington. He turned, recognition dawning slowly on his face. Senora Ann Sullivan. I just wanted to say, I know it doesn't help. I know it doesn't change anything. But I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what he did to you. He studied me for a long moment. Then, to my shock, he smiled. You know what the worst part was? Not the money. I'm 82. What do I need money for? The worst part was feeling stupid, feeling like I should have known better, should have seen through him. You're not stupid. He was good at lying. So were you, he said, not unkindly. To yourself. I read your testimony. You knew something was wrong, but you didn't want to know. That's human, Mrs. Sullivan. That's what we all do when the truth is too hard. We stood there in the cereal aisle of a Brooklyn grocery store, two people destroyed by the same man, finding unexpected understanding. Are you going to be okay? I asked. Eventually? Are you? Eventually? He nodded. Good. Because those kids of yours need you to be okay. And spite is a powerful motivator. Living well. Living well. Being happy despite what he did, that's the best revenge against someone like David. I thought about that conversation for days. About revenge, about healing, about whether the two were mutually exclusive or fundamentally connected. Thanksgiving arrived. Patricia invited us to her family dinner. But I declined. We needed our own traditions now, our own rituals unburdened by pity or performance. We made turkey sandwiches and watched movies. We went for a walk in Prospect Park, kicking through fallen leaves, breathing the cold November air. We were together, we were honest, we were rebuilding. On December 3rd, I received a letter from David's lawyer. David wanted to see the kids. He had visitation rights that I'd agreed to as part of the custody arrangement, contingent on their willingness. I showed the letter to Emma and Jacob. Let them decide. Jacob wanted to go. He's still my dad. Even if he did bad things, Emma didn't. I'm not ready. Maybe, never. Tell him, I need time. I wrote back explaining their decisions. No judgment, no pressure, just the truth. David called 2 days later. Rachel, his voice was different. Smaller. Prison had changed him, or maybe he'd just stopped pretending. They made their choices. David, you need to respect that. I know. I miss them. I miss you. You don't get to miss me. You don't get to miss what you destroyed. I'm trying to make amends. Working through my issues, understanding why I did what I did. Good for you. But your redemption isn't my responsibility. My responsibility is to our children. To rebuilding what you broke. To teaching them that honesty matters, that integrity matters, that the choices you make echo through lives beyond your own. I love you, Rachel. I never stopped loving you. Love without honesty is just manipulation, David. And I'm done being manipulated. I hung up before he could respond. Christmas was hard, the first Christmas in our apartment, without the big tree in the brownstone living room, without the traditions we'd built over 17 years. Emma cried. Jacob asked why Santa didn't bring as many presents as before. I explained for the 100th time that Santa wasn't real and we had a budget now. But we had each other. And slowly, painfully, that was becoming enough. On New Year's Eve, I stood on our small balcony watching fireworks explode over the Brooklyn Bridge. Inside, Emma and Jacob were playing a board game, arguing good-naturedly about rules. Normal sibling stuff. Normal life. Dr. Goldstein had asked me last week what I wanted for the new year. To stop being defined by what happened to me, I'd said, to be more than David Sullivan's ex-wife, to be Rachel again. Whoever she is, Who do you think she is? I'd thought about it for a long time. Someone stronger than she knows. Someone who made mistakes but is learning from them. Someone who put her children first when it mattered most. Someone who survived? Is that enough? For now. Maybe someday I'll be someone who thrived. But surviving is the first step. The fireworks continued, painting the sky in temporary beauty. Behind me, I heard my children laughing. This was my life now. Not perfect. Not easy. Not what I'd planned. But real. Honest. And that would have to be enough. Because I'd learned the hardest lesson. You can't build anything lasting on lies. Not love. Not family. Not happiness. The foundation has to be truth. Even when truth is painful, even when it destroys everything you thought you knew. I'd lost my husband, my home, my comfortable illusions. But I'd found something more valuable. Myself, my strength. My capacity to survive the unseen. And as the clock struck midnight and Brooklyn erupted in celebration, I made myself a promise. I would never again choose comfort over truth. Never again mistake performance for reality. Never again let love blind me to betrayal. My children deserved that. I deserved that. The woman in the white dress on the courthouse steps, young and naive and full of hope, she was gone, dead and buried with the life she'd believed in. But the woman standing on this balcony, watching fireworks and listening to her children laugh, she was still being born. Still learning, still fighting, still surviving, and someday, maybe, she'd be thriving too.